we do need to adapt to a new normal and a new paradigm, and around ingenuity, around resource scarcity.
Change the focus on how important having a strategy that is agile, that can flex over time, has been a huge change in the last 5 years across all sectors.
The more you do it, the more sort of reassurance there is that it can be done, and it can be done successfully, and it creates a sort of beacon of innovation for everyone in our built environment community.
Space perhaps used to be seen as a necessary evil, but it was very much a cost. And now the emphasis has shifted much more on the value.
Today, we're going to talk about one of Structuretone's core behaviours, always adapt. In a world where there's constant change, adaptability isn't nice to have, it's an absolute must, and no one understands that better than architectural designers. Today, we're speaking to Cristiano Testi and Shane Kelly of TP Bennett. That quality of adaptability, it just is so prevalent, I guess, in architecture and design. Shane, and then Chris, if you want to just tell me about yourself, what you do, and how you've come to do that role.
I suppose quite by accident. I think what we do is very vocational. I mean, I feel quite lucky that it feels like a vocation. Always been very interested in architecture of the built environment, even from like being a young person, very young person. Went into university in Australia, moved my preferences from architecture to interior design. After finding out a little bit about what that actually meant, it was quite an architectural course. In terms of technical training, balancing creativity and technical. Made my way into workplace interiors, which wasn't always the case, but I think London, being the size community I think that it is, there are sort of businesses that specialise in different types of environments. And I've been at TP Bennett for just over 20 years now, which has been a fantastic place to be in terms of pedigree of client, pedigree of mentoring, learning, and an amazing business.
The commercial interiors, it's quite a niche, and I think no one sort of sets out to be in that industry until you come to a place like London. That's just the sort of hub for people doing great work, and you've got so much opportunity to sort of change and shape how people experience their everyday work life. So interesting.
Also quite an accidental move into this world. So like Shane, I remember growing up sketching and drawing, and I remember having a passion for drawing everything from sort of cars to houses to things that drew me to design. I suppose more so than pure art and that sort of pure creativity. It was almost a flip of a coin that led me to study interior architecture as opposed to a more graphic design based course, and I'm glad I did. There was a little bit more of a clearer career path. I'd grown up in Italy until sort of my mid-teens, and then with my family, we moved here to the UK. I was fortunate to be sort of picked into a sort of junior designer role just before the big sort of global financial crisis of 2008. So got in just as the drawbridge was closing, and sort of really grew up my first few years in pretty tough circumstances with a lot of uncertainty. And I think that theme of adaptability, of resilience, of being able to sort of cope with the tough times by just getting stuck in and trying to do the best possible job that you can, even under tough circumstances, and even if it's not on the face of it the most exciting opportunity. When I actually came into office design, I thought that sounds a bit boring, offices. And I think the Office TV series was sort of airing at the time, but actually I've never looked back. It is, I think, the sector that offers the most room for creativity, because every big headquarters has a restaurant, and there are spaces for relaxation, there are spaces for meeting, and we spend more time in our workplaces than possibly any other environment, certainly our waking hours. So the impact that we can have through our work on people's lives is significant. That's ultimately a big part of the sense of purpose that I think we get through what we do.
Workplaces have become so amenity rich. Even though you may have thought you would go in a certain direction, you actually have the opportunity to design so many sort of quite specialist spaces and niche spaces, because you're having to put on different experience hats throughout that design process.
For me, that's the big surprise, I think, in sort of picking a career as a designer, as a creative, really fundamentally. And it certainly offers all of that, working in workplace interiors, working for different leading brands, organizations. But the big surprise for me at sort of this stage of my career is the real focus on strategy,
Hmm.
being a trusted advisor, getting real exposure to, business leaders, C-suite of many types of organizations, and actually really getting a sort of quite an interesting understanding of the world of business structures, and understanding how what we can do can really make a difference to them.
And that's definitely happened in the last few years. That sort of traditional role of an architect, interior designer within commercial workspaces, definitely bled out of just designing and I guess working back to input into that early strategy, that sort of real estate strategy for teams. What's some of the bigger challenges in guiding that conversation?
It's not unusual in the work we do to be in the boardroom of a big bank in the morning, having lunch with a senior partner of a law firm, and then going to work with a big tech firm in the afternoon. A lot of our clients are smaller businesses, not just major sort of international corporates. There are unique cultural nuances that distinguish each and every client that we work with. There are commonalities between financial, legal, technology, consulting. And I think that ability to adapt to the unique challenges and opportunities that each client is facing and seeking is a key part. I mean, a good example is most law firms tend to be partnerships. We ourselves are a partnership. So understanding the dynamics of a partnership can help us, I think, communicate and create solutions that can be socialized and approved within the context of a big law firm partnership. I think that adaptability to immerse ourselves into the culture and way of working of our clients, and really they feel like we're part of their team in a real way, and we feel like that we're part of their team is really important.
And strategy is the foundation really of everything that we do. Our strategy team is one of the sort of fastest growing, most important parts of our business, to create a strategy that can give our clients comfort that their ability to adapt and scenario plan about all the what ifs that that are obvious as you're committing to a potential new lease for a building for 10 to 15 years in the future, through the pandemic, which really no one wants to talk about now. But I think it really changed the focus on how important having a strategy that is agile, that can flex over time, has been a huge change in the last 5 years across all sectors.
Are you in that early advice that you're giving clients as part of that strategy piece? Are you seeing any sort of trends emerge?
I think space perhaps used to be seen as a sort of, I wouldn't maybe say as strong as a sort of necessary evil, but it was very much a cost. And now the emphasis has shifted much more on the value. It's seen as a much more integral part of a business strategy, as Shane sort of mentioned. And with that, one that is much more inherently required to adapt and flex and evolve. The fact that we are part of a much larger group that works on architecture, on urban design, on planning, and bringing that really sort of holistic, deep knowledge into how we plan things, working closely with our developer clients, but also our developer counterparts, understanding how we can really make a building sing, think about how space take can expand and contract to sort of react to market conditions and continue to add value. I think space is just becoming much more sort of organic and free flowing and sort of stretchy in a way than perhaps it used to be.
10, 15 years ago, there would be a quality difference between the parts of the building that externals used and visited, and the parts of the building that their own people occupied. And that's totally different now. If anything, there's a flip on that. The quality that organizations offer their people in terms of the spaces they're using daily, and we're talking about the workspace versus client suites and what have you. There's a real focus on what the employee experience is.
There used to be almost a bit of a squeamishness, security has to be tight, people
Yeah.
can't mix, you can't possibly have one of our people in the lift with a client because who knows what they might say. And I think that the caliber of clients we're working with now are the finest companies in the world. They seek and hire and look to retain the finest people.
Yeah.
And actually, most of the clients we're working with are service-based industries.
Mm.
So the people are the asset. The people are what they're selling, and the brains of what they're sort of marketing to their clients. Why not only allow that flow to mix, but also let's show off our talent. So we're seeing a lot of organizations looking at things like business lounges and sort of F&B facilities where maybe some are more client focused and some are more sort of personnel focused, but that ability to mix.
That
um,
boundary becomes fluid between those groups of individuals.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the expectation on behavior and conduct is so high, not only on output, but it's not just what people do, but how they do it. As standards of quality, both around the space and the behavior and how people use that space, are continuing to elevate, so comes a bit more of sort of relaxation in how people interact.
The building stock in London is sort of keeping up with that upward trajectory in sort of holistic quality across the board for both staff and clients.
If you look at sort of new builds in London, I mean, it is, I think, I think it's absolutely exemplar. It sets the standard in terms of design, detail, amenity. And of course, we've got a retrofit first.
From our point of view, it's certainly a trend that we're seeing. It's understandable if you look at, the stock that we've got to deal with, and having that sort of retrofit first mindset. I guess it just sort of begs the question, how do we achieve that same level of quality that we would in a new build when you've got clients who expect that level, and how do you sort of manage that conversation with them?
The approach is much more qualitative than quantitative. And if I expand on what Shane said around the BCO, and which I think is a very good barometer of what excellence is, it's their mission to define excellence in workspace. Two of the awards that we've been fortunate to win ourselves with the BCO this year for Capital Group, and last year for BP, both of them, in our opinion, beautiful designs. But I think what captured the judges' attention was so much more than good design. There were themes around variety and richness of the amenities in the workspace, big focus on sustainability and how you use the materials that we have, and sort of being mindful with use of resources. I don't think it's an arms race to who provides the best or the shiniest amenities. It's about how those amenities unlocking an exceptional experience, whether it's convenience, whether it's conviviality, whether it's mental health, physical health. And I think one of the big challenges we're going to face is clearly not every development in London can be a brand new, shiny new build. Where we're seeing real success is people or developers and occupiers who are able to see the magic in a building that's repositioned well. And we've recently worked with a client who has been looking at a historic building that's been adapted very sensitively, with a very sort of pared back and considerate use of the existing structure and the existing fabric, and embrace something with character and something that is imperfect but has a lot more positive things than negative things because of that imperfection. Where we think there'll be a struggle is where things are done the old way but badly.
We advised a client sort of during the pandemic on a move, and there were options that were in some of the shiny new towers in London. And when we got involved, there was an option that had been dismissed before our appointment. How on earth has this one ended up being dismissed from the options? And it was a part historic building, part refurbished building, but it just offered the most incredible opportunity in terms of the other brief aspirations that the client had about connectivity and transparency and things that were much more difficult to achieve in one of the newer spec office towers. It very soon became top of the pack. We're closing out their construction for them this year, and they'll be moving into it. And
Amazing.
I think it's an excellent example. And if there's anywhere in the world where existing building stock has incredible character, diversity, variety, and has a community of designers that have the imagination and technical know-how to bring these buildings back to the market, it's London.
We do need to adapt to a new normal and a new paradigm, and around ingenuity, around resource scarcity, around really using what we have with judgment. But it's about doing things a bit differently and doing things a bit cleverly. Clients are actually very adaptable in our experience. Our community of architects is adaptable, but there are sectors of the market that I think are a little bit lagging behind and a little bit stuck in stuck in the old ways.
The more you do it, the more sort of reassurance there is that it can be done and it can be done successfully. And it creates a sort of beacon of innovation for everyone in our built environment community. Evolution in the relationship between architect and contractor. How are you seeing that dynamic change?
It has to be teamwork. There's an argument that, that should happen early, depending on the size, scale, complexity of the project, that should be happening as early as possible in the process, subject to the other things we've talked about. I think what we do as an industry, we've talked like about design and people can see that as very much aesthetic look and feel, but actually we're problem solvers. And I think if we're talking about the other challenges we just mentioned in terms of, reuse, retrofit first, these are complex problems to solve, and it really needs, as you say, a multidisciplinary mindset to get the best out of these projects.
Particularly in the world of big scale sort of general contracting, most general contractors are ultimately consultants. They're not building anything. Obviously, the supply chain, the subcontractors are doing the majority of the manufacturing and the building. So that shift into seeing the GC as a team member, as an expert and as a specialist in the same way as the design team members, as the QS, as the PM, makes a lot of sense. And as Shane said, good examples. The most resource intensive part of any project is the construction and the manufacturing. So leveraging the knowledge of the GC and their partners early on, I think just gives a little bit more time in mitigating commercial and sort of lead time risk, but also opens up opportunities to work with supply chain specialists in developing innovative technology solutions, innovative methods of construction and manufacture, so that we can produce always better quality work and always with a sort of lighter tread on the environment and on the planet.
That early partnership piece is something that's just coming up so often now. A desire to want to collaborate and also understanding the tangible benefits of doing that really early is something that I think is becoming really evident.
It's something we often get asked, I suppose, as a business that has a very significant part of our business is advising occupiers. The developer community, they often reach out to us and say, can you review this scheme for us? How do you think it works from an occupier mindset? Because it's very easy, to sort of get focused on the task at hand. And it's a place where we really like to help add value and get in early and talk to the developers and understand, what they're looking to achieve and talk about what we're seeing in terms of trends and direction of travel, and make sure that what is being produced is going to be, snapped off the shelf when it.
Yeah, great product, because that's what they're producing, right?
How does the building work under a high density financial services layout? How does it work for a maybe perhaps more traditional legal occupier? How does it subdivide, sublease, in terms of looking at making sure that whoever's reviewing the building, which we do a lot of for our clients as well, isn't red marking it against potential future flexibility.
Again, the arms race to the sort of most impressive set of sort of building stats is a little bit a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I think a building that is not quite as sort of high performing on occupancy as another one that is, much more sort of rich in amenities and experiences and has a really good story around social value and sustainability and brand and design, that is much more fragmented. And a lot of the time when we're advising both occupiers and developers, people are asking us, well, do we really need a building that offers 1 in 8 across the board? And that dynamic is definitely changing.
What's driving that? Would you say you've got a more educated client base nowadays who understand the nuances in putting the strategy together rather than just catalog shopping because it makes great PR?
I think, and there's a sort of, again, a move to a more experience-based workplace. I think, aided by technology, certainly accelerated by the sort of experiments of the pandemic, where activity-based working in its true sense is really becoming much more of a reality. And whilst, of course, counterintuitively, COVID's taught us anything, it's actually the importance of being together and of working together in person. I think there's a lot more adaptability around, the sort of the boundaries are much more blurred. There's less of a focus of everyone has to be at their desk 9 to 5. There's much more a realization that work can sort of happen anywhere within the footprint of the sort of the building or the sort of headquarters, and beyond that, it's clients' meeting rooms, it's clients' offices, it's the odd day working from home. Sort of chickens in a battery farm at their desks is a thing of the past. Over engineering a building to have the best set of stats is seen as, at best, unnecessary, and at worst, a little bit wasteful. The caveat to all of that is, I think, a building that adapts. So if a developer designs their building at 1 in 10 or even 1 in 12, but an occupier comes along and says, right, I've actually got a sort of very high density meeting room requirement, and I do have a trading business, and there are days, anchor days, where everyone's going to be pointed at the building at the same time. How can your building adapt to that in terms of services, in terms of WCs, in terms of lifting? If the lift performance is going to be a bit slower than, say, the BCO, but there's a great coffee bar in the reception, and that up peak is going to be distributed, then there's that's another way of sort of looking at how to organize a building.
We're moving office this year, and it did have a raised floor in it, but it created all kinds of complexity around. It's an historic building, so lift thresholds and stair thresholds, and we've decided just to take it out. It's gaining our space back, and we're just exposing the fabric of the building to bring out that authenticity and character. And as I said before, like London is a city that is spoilt for choice in terms of building with character and quality, and historic character and quality.
Absolutely. Goes back to that opportunity where you really do understand a client's brand and their people and what they're striving. There's an opportunity to, I guess, get them to see that richness and how it can benefit them and their workplace and their brand. We've just very recently had a conversation with a developer around their views as to, how they go about their sort of Cat A strategy. I think there is, across the board, a recognition that it is silly, but they still have clients that they have to market these spaces at. So, the reduction in Cat A obviously has come down quite significantly. We're seeing sort of portions of floors that are being sort of fitted out, shell and floor. There are other strategies, but I guess it's really about educating folks who go and view those spaces.
We're working with a particular client at the moment who historically would have been more maybe on the traditional side of the aesthetic sort of spectrum, where with the client and the developer and the developer's architect, we agreed to have exposed concrete in all the lift lobbies. Obviously there's a sort of cost and carbon saving to having exposed concrete, but crucially the client unanimously bought into it because the way that the design had been crafted felt like a sort of trendy boutique hotel. It didn't feel like a sort of warehouse.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like they were moving into a sort of, tech startup's office. It felt like a sort of 5-star boutique hotel with beautifully executed concrete lift lobby finishes. And again, that change in mindset between that sort of sector-led aesthetics is hugely changed.
Because there are obviously those sectors that we perceive as being really sort of forward thinking and innovative, and then those that are more traditional in their approach to workplace. Are you seeing a sector that's sort of buckling the trend?
Depending on the client, they probably all are at the moment.
Yeah.
I
totally
think,
agree.
The concept of authenticity, I think, is important here. We are going to have, I'd say, more variety and diversity of building type and choice as Retrofit First continues, and we bring old buildings back to the market new, and we continue to build new stock. We've got to really work with what we have and, expressing the bones of a building, making sure that, that inert character within the buildings can become a part of the features of the scheme, exposing structures, exposing some of the structural finishes where you can. It's only got to be to the benefit, I think, in terms of the carbon stories of buildings in London, which is where we were founded. We are, as I mentioned before, we're moving office. It's the first time we've moved office in, I think, 25 years.
Wow.
And we're under the same pressure that our clients are. So we're our own client at the moment, which is obviously very interesting for anyone that's ever had that role. And we've had to face a lot of these big questions ourselves as a business. We're global and we're trying to extend that reach, but we're an independent business. We have been in the same building for 25 years. We're in an area of London that has been sort of seen as a sort of a low rent part of London, very central in the South Bank, but it's changing a lot. So we've had to really, and we looked at options obviously about whether we stayed where we were, whether we went sort of further afield, and the unanimous decision was we needed to stay central. But that's meant that we've had to adapt financially. We've had to look at our space take, what our strategy is for our business, looking at adopting agility as a core part of our strategy, looking at the role that our building plays for our people, how we can make sure that we're future-proofing our space for the future generations of TP Bennett, which has always been a really important part of our model. So it's very exciting for us at the moment, but we're our own change manager at the moment, because the adaptation that our business needs to make to make a success of this move, this sort of once in a generational move that we've got, is in real time we're having these discussions, and it's a very exciting time, but it's also as people that are advising their clients on these types of decision points daily, it's very interesting to be doing it with your. I
mean, Shane has the sort of fortune, privilege, and misfortune, I suppose, of being quite involved with the project. I'm a sort of a stakeholder, but again, also a designer.
How is he as a client, Shane?
Great.
Pain in the ass.
No, I would say, people refer to these projects as the poison chalice.
Yeah.
And it just in our business, it doesn't feel that way at all. There's a real excitement, and there's a real trust, because, not everyone can be involved. Everyone needs to be listened to and heard and input into the process. But, we've got a business to run as well. And what I would say is the designers that are all working on it are absolutely loving it, because they're being cheered on by their colleagues to feed into the process and to make the space as good as it can possibly be.
We just had our 100th birthday as a firm, coming out of a sort of, a pretty transformational and disruptive global event.
Yeah.
But with so many initiatives around brand building, global reach,
board transformation,
a sort of natural generational evolution of our leadership, and it's a lot happening at the same time. But I think there are way more benefits in that than there are sort of challenges, because every single, I suppose, work stream and sort of piece of activity has the ability to boost and supercharge the surrounding ones. So, and the brand and the building are a good example of where that leverage is really felt.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with me today. I hope you enjoyed it too. Good.
Yes, thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Great.
Good old natter, right? It's a nice respite from all the hard work. Next time we'll do it over a glass of wine. Outside in the sun on a rooftop.
It's all
One of those moustaches and glasses.